All right, so addressing a topic about treatment for dissociative identity disorder, or DID. Integration, when discussing DID, is talking about integrating all the parts into one consciousness. And so instead of having this identity that has multiple and this consciousness that has alternate states, it would be, a normal consciousness, a normal identity. And the process for that is addressing every single trauma that has ever occurred in life, including any traumatic effects from the trauma. When you have decades of trauma, if you don't find out you have DID until late in life, or even if it's early on in life and it's just progressed very rapidly, which is another thing I can talk about another time. When that's happened, that type of treatment approach seems very impractical. To invest, buku years in addressing the most painful moments of life. And, it gets worse before it gets better, in the sense that, processing trauma, the process of processing trauma, it makes things worse. But once you get through it, in theory, you're healed and things get better. But if that process is 10 years, is that really the way to go? Is there an alternative? Well, there is an alternative, but most doctors don't know about it or have never practiced it. And so I have not been able to find a doctor willing to work with me. So I've been doing all of my DID treatment on my own. And I've discovered that works better at times. If you can't find a therapist who is qualified and who you can trust, doing it on your own can be better. There is information enough out there to figure this stuff out. You just have to be willing to do the work to get there. And it is a crap ton of work. But I did discover this alternate treatment approach called the co-consciousness approach. It is talked about in a book that I discuss in some of my other videos. I can have links to those in the video description below. Co-consciousness is getting to know the different parts and learning to work with them, to collaborate with them. So they might integrate to some degree. Some of the parts that only hold trauma and don't function at all might be able to disappear or become less frequent, or, less intense. And some of the parts might not be needed anymore because the system overall is able to be more functional. And so they might kind of disappear or kind of combine qualities with a different part. But there's always going to be different parts. And for some, there will be still, amnesic barriers to some degree and stuff like that. But you can live this somewhat functional life because you can get to a place of peace and healing to such an extent that the parts can work together despite their differences and despite all the chaos and pain of life. And to get there, you do not have to process all of the trauma. I believe that you would have to process all of the effects of the trauma, such as beliefs you hold about yourself and the world around you because of the trauma that has occurred. For example, I'm worthless. Or my worth is only based in, the sexual favors I can do for my partner, or the amount of money I can make, or the level of pride my family takes in me, or, that's just some of hundreds of possibilities. And so if we can focus on just processing the consequences, the after effects from the trauma, and focus on that, and focus on healing in the sense of getting to know my parts and their pain in order to be there for them, rather than with the goal of processing everything to the degree that they no longer exist. It's all very complicated and there's a lot more to it, and I might not be doing a very good job of explaining it. But I think there's a lot of benefits to the co-consciousness approach, and that is the approach that I am taking personally. But it is a personal choice. Everyone has a different version of dissociative identity disorder. Everyone has different goals for their life. Everyone has different thresholds for how much they want to, deal with and cope with, and if they're comfortable being an outsider to some degree. I've always been an outsider even before I knew I had DID, and so I'm kind of over that aspect. Like that part is fine with me. I just want to be able to function, and so I'm okay if I have multiple states of consciousness. I just want them to get along, and so that is kind of the goal of the co-consciousness approach. It's a much more kind approach than full integration, because full integration, you're kind of just digging into the wound to scrape out the crap and hope it heals, right? Is kind of how I perceive it and have experienced it. Whereas co-consciousness is very tenderly caring for the wound until it naturally heals enough to walk, until you can walk on your own. And it might not be fully healed, and it might still hurt from time to time, but it's such a much more loving process of healing rather than an aggressive approach. So that's kind of a little bit of what I know about integration and DID treatment. And of course, the process for that's a whole nother conversation we can approach. Please do leave your questions and comments below. I spend so much time immersed in this topic that I never know how much I've already talked about and how much makes sense, and what questions might still be lingering and what I'm not clarifying enough. So please do let me know, and I can make future videos and articles to clarify and address those topics, because I really do want to be able to make sense of this for myself, for others struggling with DID, and for people who care about mental health and care about people like me. Thank you so much for joining my journey, and I really look forward to continuing in this growing and healing process with each and every one of you beautiful souls. Blessings. Namaste.